Okay, so last class we discussed about the second wave and how the second wave began with which seminal work, girls? Which is the seminal work which actually started the second wave, and who is a feminist? Who's known as the mother of the second wave? It is Betty Friedan. Don't forget it, okay? It is actually Betty Friedan. She is known as basically the instigators or the mother of the second wave. So you find Betty Friedan, Kate Millett, and Simone de Beauvoir. These three feminists are the ones who actually initiated and they carried over their idea, their concerns about ideology, the patriarchal, the ways and modes of oppression. All right, sex-based discrimination and how it worked. And you find at the end of the second wave, what the second wave feminists failed to address was basically what the issues of the non-white. So via this essentialism, there grew two groups of, I believe, feminists, and you find they either worked on the basis of differences or similarities. And the essentialists as a group, they emerged with the idea that women are basically different, and in this difference they are the same. So there was this tendency to homogenize women. And when I say women, you have to think of women all across the globe. All right, women everywhere. So what they basically try to say is that all all the so-called women in this world are oppressed in a similar manner. Their experiences are the same. The ways and modes of oppression are also similar. All right. Now, this is the point of departure, or this becomes the main reason for the split, or the reason why the second wave as a feminist movement basically failed, because it failed to address the issues of the non-white. All right. So the third wave actually rose as a backlash against the failures of the second phase. But if you look at feminism as a movement which basically gave us our rights, the reason why we are here at this juncture, then we would have to admit each wave, each movement for the rights of women are extremely important. All right. But when you take these waves in its entirety, you realize that the second wave basically failed because it built its, I believe, its foundation on the notion that women are all the same, they have the same needs, they undergo same experiences or torture. Can you understand? So it is this tendency of the second wavers, not all of them, of course, to homogenize the different races of women, not just the black but the brown. All right. When we talk about feminism from the first and the second wave, we are still thinking about white women essentially. And what these white women believed, that, the way a woman is oppressed, they believe that that was the only way that women were oppressed. So you find that women of different classes, if you belong to high class, even if you are a white woman, the way you are addressed, the way you are marginalized would also depend on your class, your race, and the geographical location where you are from. So the second wave basically ignored this. Okay. So you find it was necessary. Maybe there was a reason behind such an homogenization. Maybe the intention was to bring about a solidarity, to unite women or make women realize that there is a need for women to come together. So to create this unity, maybe initially it was important for these feminists to create a homogenized narrative about women. But then you find the third wave is actually a backlash against this homogenizing tendency of the second wave. All right. And one of the main charges was that of the third wave was that the second wave only catered to, what did I say? The white middle class heterosexual. So sexuality also, alternative sexuality is also featured. What was important in for the second wave, for the third wavers. All right, because the second wave did not actually accept women who belong to different or who accepted or had any other form of sexuality. All right. So the lesbian, the LGBTQIA group as a group was completely ignored by the second wavers, and this was taken up by the third wavers. All right. And the third wave basically ignored women who belong to the privileged clan. Okay. So if you belong to the privileged group or sect, they were completely ignored by the third wave because the third wave had other agenda that was giving importance to women of other races. Why? Why? Can anyone tell me? Because how a Dalit woman in northern India would live her life, would experience marginalization, oppression, would be very different from how a Dalit woman in southern India would feel it, right? But then these Dalit women do not even feature in the so-called, I believe, the agenda of the second waivers. There is no idea, there is no concept of the so-called subaltern. What about if you are not part of the so-called dominant sexual group? What if you are not a heterosexual? Where does that put you? Where do you stand there? So you find the third wave basically rose as a movement against the second wave. The third wave basically did what? Brought to the forefront the problems of the other gender, the alternative sexualities. They also brought into focus the various races. All right. And they also questioned the patriarchal inventions of binary. Because when you talk about the patriarchal invention of binary, there is no scope for an alternative sexuality. You always talk in terms of male or female, right? Yes or no? Culture or nature. So this is where the second wave came, or this is why they were criticized. And then what happened was there was a major focus, there was a major change, a shift towards not macro but micro politics. Girls, if you're searching for the page, it's page 75. And you find the backbone of the third wave would be this wonderful anthology. This wonderful anthology brought forward by editors Gloria Angelude and Bell Hooks. All right. And that was a anthology. It was written by women of color. You find women of color basically wrote about their feelings. They wrote about their experiences in this wonderful anthology edited by Gloria. Please remember these names, girl. Gloria Anzuluda and Bell Hooks. And if you look at the picture, you will see. All right. And then you have there was a need. You find writers, you find critics like Diana Fuss. They spoke about what? They spoke about people who belong to the non-white. All right, the non-white, the non-heterosexual, and of course they focused on people belonging to the marginalized or the lower class. All right, so you can see how there was a shift. There was a complete shift, and you find the experiences of the so-called minorities, the non-white, came about, it came forward, or it came together in this anthology. It is the 1981 anthology, and it is this wonderful work called The Bridge Called My Back. It is the writings by radical women of color. So this is the anthology I was talking about. And in this anthology, you find one of the essays. You have to understand the anthology. These are writings by women of color. It did not include what? It did not include it did not include writings by white women at all. The focus was on women of color from different races. And here in this work, you find, I believe, a very bold description of white women by a woman of color. Okay. And look at this wonderful way. Aesthetically, and this is page 76, girls, aesthetically and physically, we frequently find white women repulsive. That is, their skin colors are unaesthetic. Why? They look sick, anemic. All right. Ugly to some. Their hair, stringy and straight, is unattractive. Their bodies rather like misshapen lumps of whitish clay or dough that somebody forgot to mold in certain areas. Furthermore, they have a strange body odor. So this is something that you would never hear, because we belong to a country, we still belong to, I believe, a culture where color is always given importance, right? The fairer you are, what happens to you? If you're fair, what happens to you? If you're tall and fair, if you're tall and you're fair, then that is the only quality that is needed, required by women, right? I believe Fair and Lovely, till a couple of, I believe, years ago, they still advocated what? You have to be fair. Yes. So here you have a very alternative. I believe this is an which is a reaction against so-called white women. Yes, girls.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you agree or disagree?
Fairness and tallness is the considered as the main beauty concept.
I know. Yeah, tall, fair, and thin, and definitely the marriage market also. That is what they ask for, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Tall, fair girl. Nowadays, I believe they also use the word educated. Thank God for that. But they still do not really want women who have a career, do they? Very few. It is still about your dowry. It's still about, even if you're tall and fair, dowry is still very important.
And also, its body shape also important, ma'am.
Yeah, body shape, definitely. You have to look like a Bollywood star and
Kind
still
of
give, yeah.
yes.
But this is how we are. Even though we criticize, all right, here when I say we, I am including myself in this category. All of us still look at fair people with admiration. Yes, it is ingrained in us. I believe this concept of whiteness, I believe it's like, it has been there in our mind. It has been cultured and nurtured since ages. Very difficult for us to come away. We never look at, when you think of beauty, it begins uh, from a very young age. When you look at babies, you tend to always look at white babies, right? Fair babies. That becomes even such an innocent picture. Just imagine such a small baby, genderless, but still, again, you find a boy baby more charming. And then, of course, you have the fair white baby, female baby looking good. What about, can you understand? It begins then and there. So I believe it is very difficult to come away, but here you have an essayist who's very vocal, very verbal about how she feels about white women, that they are repulsive, their colors are not very pleasing, the hair is all straight and stringy. They look like strings, and their bodies have no shape at all, as opposed to black women or women of color, maybe Spanish women. They are beautiful. But when we think about beauty, we never think about Spanish women. We think about we think about Miss World pageants, right? Miss World, Miss Universe pageants, where they all look kind of like a skeleton, yes or no? That is our idea of beauty.
Yes, ma'am.
All the products also cater to that, right? From dieting to diet pills to slimming pills to I believe fairness creams. There isn't a single cream that is not a fairness or a brightening skin. Now they have changed fairness to brightness cream. How many of you agree with that? Are you sunlight? Are you do you believe you can exude light? I don't know.
Ma'am, Fair and Lovely changed its name to
Yeah,
Glow
yeah,
and
that's what I said. They changed its name because of some kind of allegation.
yeah, it's changed its
But ma'am, it's still funny. Their advertisement is like HD glow.
I know, glow, brightening, and the thing is, we still buy it, right? The problem is, even though we are criticizing it, when we go out, we always buy anti-tan, right? Brightening skin products, whitening skin products. We go to beauty parlors. You just want to look beautiful. The problem is, our idea of beautiful is also patriarchal, right? Think about it. Just think about it. And then when you admire another girl, and that too in a verbally, people just look at you as if there is something wrong with you. If you admire the opposite gender, there is no problem. Nowadays, especially, it's very easy for you to be labeled the third gender also. So that again is not correct. I'm just telling you, at least maybe your the next generation, your kids and your grandkids will feel different about all these things. All right. Maybe it's very difficult for us to go back. All right. So this is what the third wave was all about. So you find this is an opposition to the essentialist idea of what the second wave was all about. And you find that in each of these writers, it's wonderful if we can simply at least go through a summary of what this volume or anthology has to talk about. It talks about, uh, the idea that there isn't a common experience of oppression. There are different ways of oppression. All right. It is not purely physical. It can be mental, emotional. There are different ways that a women would be oppressed in society. So now the essentialist argument that there is a common experience, that is what they were against. All right. So look at this, page 76. The question is whether a black woman has more in common with white women of upper middle class or with black men. So the comparison basically changes or shifts. Another pitfall of the concept of essentialism is that its tendency is to accentuate the structures of male dominance in society. So a deconstruction of binary which legitimize the generalization of femininity is central to the project of the third wavers. So for the third waivers, what is important is this deconstruction of binary, because this binary basically agrees to this generalization of femininity. All right. So we first have to deconstruct this binary of male, female, nature, and nature and culture. Because when you say male and female, again there is this idea that females are all the same. All right, there is this tendency to generalize. So that deconstructing this binary becomes or became the central project concern for the third waivers. Because you find Amy, look at Amy Schreifer clarifies the position of third waivers as thus: the perceived either or is difficult for those who grew up bisexual. What do you mean by bisexual, girls? Because last time I asked you, you were blank when I asked you about the LGBT. What do you mean by bisexual? It is not just being sexual. You have to understand, or you are attracted emotionally, physically, and mentally as well. You find bisexuality is a natural pull towards or attraction towards both the genders, male as well as female. So when you grow up in such an environment, interracial, where you have the mother is white, father is black, or the other way around. Transgender, you have gay couples adopting children, all right, or being surrogate parents. What happens to children? What happens when you grow up in such an environment? Just think about it. They're living in a postmodern, multicultural world, and their identities are beyond this superficial either or, male or female. There is absolutely no way that we can ever have these two labels or this binary, because such children, such I believe 21st century children cannot be labeled. They will have to create their own identities. I do not know how many of you go through, how many of you have Netflix and ആർക്കെങ്കിലും? Because this again becomes an idea for you to take up for your project. If you have Netflix, there is this beautiful, wonderful web series called The Bold Type. The Bold Type. So there again, there is this issue of a woman. She's a young black woman. She does not know herself because her parents hid. They did not hide. They just made her, they believe that they empowered her by not telling her about her heritage. Father is black, mother is white. She believed that she was heterosexual. Later, she thought she was a lesbian. And then later on, she discovered she's bisexual. It is the trauma of that child and how she, how she emerges, how an identity, she creates and recreates her identity. That becomes the essence of that web series. It's a part of it. I'm just telling you so that you can understand the complexity of this so-called identity. All right, this patriarchal binary that has been thrust into our minds, and how you find the third waivers understood the need for individuals to create their own identities that acknowledge these ambiguities, multiple positions. So please underline that: their own identities, ambiguities, and multiple positions. The third waivers believe that negotiation and contradiction of our differences is the main concept of modern feminism. So modern feminism is not about saying I belong to this or that. It is about accepting the differences, negotiating identities. All right. Yes. Yes, girls.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So these are basically the main, I believe, agenda. These are the main things that the third wave was focused on. All right. So you find the third wave becomes more or less, I believe, the more mature sort of a movement when you look at it from the first wave. From a wave point of view, the first wave was rather immature. They're still finding their footing. Then you have the second wave, and then you have the third wave. All right. So then sexuality also was a dominant concern for the contemporary feminists. There was a lot of opposition. There was a lot of problems. All right. That they had to face. And then you can see these are the main critics. I've made this into a slide so that for from an examination point of view, when you prepare an essay, you can include all these as points. All right. So they called into question the male female dichotomy, androcentrism. What do you mean by androcentrism? Man at the center, woman as always the other. So the biological essentialism, the reproduction of male dominance in society, these are the main things that they focused on. All right. Now, page 77, there is this concept of objection. Now, who actually brought about this idea of objection? What is this objection? Objection is basically in something intolerable without pride or dignity. So now she brings psychoanalysis into feminist theoretical discussions. So now what she believed, her greatest contribution is that she believed that there should be a new discourse of maternity because its maternal function, it should be separated from gender. Now, Western culture has effectively reduced maternity to a level where it is linked up with nature or equated with the reproduction function. You find she has been made sacred so that she may forego the claims of the body, right? When you just think about the mother's body becomes sacred, something primal, and then her whole idea, her whole identity is reconstructed, and you find maternity becomes something else altogether. And you find this idea of maternity is also linked with the child's entry into subjectivity. The body of the mother is objected through its role of fulfilling the needs of the infant. What happens as a consequence is the abjection of the woman, the feminine, and the mother. Separating the activities of the caretaker from the sex of the caretaker would provide a way of de-essentializing the concept of maternity. So what happens now, I believe in European countries, there is a slight change. But whenever you look at these advertisements, whether it is Johnson and Johnson or Himalaya baby product, you have a new, beautiful, of course, a new fair-looking baby being given to its mother, right? Newly delivered baby given to its mother. The mother is bathing, right? Looking happy, fondling the baby, and then she is what? She is nothing more than that. All right. The mother is nothing more than that. So the mother becomes the body, nothing more than a body. All right. Mother becomes the vessel, she becomes the body. There is no woman. Where is the individual there? So it is, it is an essentialization. You find the woman, all right, the feminine and the mother becomes one. It becomes an idealized notion. So what we have to do is separate it. All right. And you find this mother and child, the relationship of the mother and the child, which begins in the womb. becomes something altogether different. It becomes something altogether very different when the child enters from the semiotic to the symbolic. The moment the child understands language, the child is removed. The child is taught to reject the mother. The child is rejects the mother and enters into a new world where the father takes on the primal significance. So there is a sort of an objection that happens of this mother. So you find Kristeva, she intervenes, or she talks about this symbolic and the semiotic. All right. And this objection is something that is without or lacks pride or dignity. So just imagine the idea of a mother, idea of feminine or woman. It's always attached to the body. It is always attached to what? Just the body. Can you understand? And then the mother is gradually rejected. When the child leaves the mother, stops feeding. All right. When the mother stops breastfeeding, and when the child is taught to clean itself, eat by itself, the umbilical cord is cut. Can you understand? So the maternal body is removed from the child, and the mother, anything maternal, is abjected by the child. All right. And that objection becomes the stepping stone into this thing called the symbolic order, where the child expels the mother. The mother becomes abject to understand and become part of the world that is the father. Can you understand? Girls?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So now here again, I believe this is a cut, copy, paste. Here you find how poetry, remember this feminism as a chapter began with how poetry contributed to feminism. All right. So we are coming back to this idea that in the third wave, close attention was given to poetry as a movement, poetry as a means or as a space for, it's a unique space where people could or women could recreate their identities. It is a unique space. And you find it is certain writers like Audre Lorde who speaks about the close link between poetry and feminist movement. So according to Audre Lorde, poetry is like mother. All right. It is like the semiotic. It is a language which is as complex as the mother. Now, when I say the mother, I'm not talking about one individual. I am talking about the connection, the link, the language that a mother and the child has, not after the woman gives birth, but even before that. Okay, as just imagine when the child is in the womb of the mother and the child, they have their language. It's like a secret language. It's like a secret communication. It's only the mother and the child who can understand each other, even post birth. To a certain age, you find the mother and the child communicate. Similarly, to understand that language, to understand woman, you have to understand that language. And that language is a language which patriarchy can never define. And that is poetry. All right. So, poetry and the feminist movement are closely linked because poetry is something very important for our existence. Everything that a woman experiences can be expressed through poetry. Yes? Is that okay? All right. So you find there isn't a single language in this, world that can express the experiences of women, because language, girls, basically is patriarchal. Language has been compromised. Language always caters to the need of patriarchy. Language has always been used to subdue women. All right. Just think about it. When you have these roadside Romeos, right? You know what roadside Romeos are, right? Girls, girls, are you there? Are you still there?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Think about the words that are used to describe women, especially beautiful women or attractive women as they are walking by men. The words, you don't have to explain. You know the words, right? You do not have to express it here, but you know the words that are used by men to refer to women. Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
As commodities. Can you understand? Language is always patriarchal. Language always puts us in shackle. Then can we create a new language that women understand, which is only about women, which talks about the position, the feelings, the experiences of women? In a way, yes. It is only through poetry. Poetry basically becomes the best tool. It becomes the best tool to talk about the nameless experiences of women. So feminists basically they have a problem. They try to invent a language that will only speak about their problems, their experiences, their dreams, their hopes, their ambition. But you find language is always patriarchal. From words like chairman, now it is chairperson. Earlier fireman, postman, policeman. Of course, now we have alternative words entering police officer, right? Firefighter. But that is not enough. We have to shift focus to poetry for certain basic needs. All right. So the most important need of the hour was to, uh, start something new, to effect a transformation. And what is this transform? It is all about transformation and writing, editing. Because when do you get knowledge? How do you get knowledge? Writing, editing, and performing. And you find knowledge is very important. Okay. So you find we have to infiltrate the so-called language. We have to infiltrate the various forms of study. Of course, feminism has changed, but you find poetry has played a major role in bringing about that transformation. Because if you still look at things which have not been changed, that is, if you take any sacred text, any spiritual or sacred text, you will find it is still in the throes of patriarchy. It still talks about men and everything from a man's point of view. So whatever changes has been brought about in academic thought and study, it is through poetry. All right. So a major shift was to create groups. What kind of groups? Conscious raising groups. All right. There are a lot of conscious raising groups. There were a lot of discussions. All these happened in the third wave. And what was the reason for consciousness raising? To bring together women. Because there women could share their problems. And such sharing led to plans of action. Women could plan. So this consciousness raising was a major significant movement. And you find, as T.V. Reid puts it, as the critic puts it, in women's movements, one of the key forms, though hardly the only one, had been writing, reading, and performing of poetry. So it is grounded in poetry. And no other movement has been so grounded in poetry as feminism. So for feminism, the best tool was poetry. And you find a lot of anthologies were published during this period, like Sisterhood is Powerful, an anthology of writing from the women's liberation movement, edited by Robin Morgan. If you read Robin Morgan's poems, you'll be, I believe, stupefied, scandalized, more like it. And then you have a major collection that focused on women of color, and that is the work The Black Women, The Black Woman, edited by Tony Cadd. So you find feminism became a complex movement because it brought together ideas about race, culture, right? The class and gender. And poetry basically became the tool. It became the medium of articulation. Now, if you ask me how it became the medium of articulation, we have a couple of poems which basically would tell us how it became the medium. And you find poetry also help bridge this chasm between the so-called essentialized woman, notion of one kind of woman, and then you have these multiple, ethnocentric groups within the movement. So there was this, I believe there is a huge chasm between the white, heterosexual, white upper class woman, and you have the other group. All right, that is a multiple ethnocentric, multi-sexuality group. So poetry became a tool or a medium which basically brought together women. Yes. So next we have this wonderful poem called Monster by Robin Morgan. So you find she was an amazing woman. She is a poet, a novelist, a journalist, and her anthology, Sisterhood is Powerful, was what actually started this contemporary movement, feminist movement. All right. So these are some of her works. And can you see this, girls? This is the entire poem. What we have is only a small excerpt. What we have is only a small excerpt. Even that is more than enough. All right. So this is actually the entire poem, okay, which is called Monster. Okay. Girls, I'm stopping here for now. Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Tomorrow, can I have a session? Tomorrow and day after tomorrow, if possible. Don't worry, it will not be very long, but I need to finish my portions. Tomorrow, maybe not on Wednesday, but tomorrow, can you give me one session?